This meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, at the outset, I want to apologize for having a cold, and if I'm not clear, please tell me. And you can nudge me if you want to. Okay. Welcome to the October 2nd meeting. Second item on the agenda is the minutes of the August and September meetings. There have been some internal discussions about format and content that we want to change for long-term purposes. So we're not going to act on these two sets of minutes. We're going to have them available to everyone on the Planning Commission in about 2 weeks or so, and we'll test out the new format. Some of this is at the suggestion of our solicitor. So there's no vote on the minutes at this time. Okay, the first applicant, 585 County Line Road. Are we here?
Good evening. My name is Rod Fluck. I'm from the firm of Butera, Bosang, Cohen & Brennan, and I'm here on behalf of Allison and James McGuckin.
Excuse me. I don't think your microphone's on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or you might have to lean down into it a little bit tall.
Unless you prefer.
This is fine.
Thank you.
I'm here on behalf of Allison and James McGuckin. Our engineer, Patrick Spellman, is here also. What we're proposing here is a minor subdivision, but in substance is really a revision to lot lines. If we look on the existing plan as shown on the board, it'll be clear why we want to do what we want to do. My client owns this parcel and this parcel, that's the McGuckins. This parcel and this parcel are owned by the Schwartzmans. And the plan, which will be clearer from the second sheet, is to draw a lot line here, erase this lot line and make one merged lot here, and then erase that lot line so that what we'll have is essentially 2 lots where 3 were before. And that's shown more clearly on the proposed plan where we have 1 enlarged lot here and 1 enlarged lot here. And we have, instead of 3, we have 2. There's no improvements contemplated. There should be no change to any traffic or any vehicular load. And it is simply an adjustment of lot lines.
Any questions?
I have a couple of quick questions. So the piece of land that's directly south of the McGuckins, that third lot, that's going to be created there, as well as the one that is, I guess, southwest of it? Southwest is also owned by the McGuckins? Nope.
This is owned by the McGuckins.
Right, and then below it?
This will be also. These are not, no.
So one of them,
Actually, this.
yeah,
this
one of them
yes.
says that they are.
Right.
So the lot that is going to also be created, well, it's adjacent to the new created lot. How big is that lot? Is that developable?
There was.
This one?
This,
Yes.
This lot, there was a structure on that lot at one point. There's nothing on it now. And I don't know whether anything is possible with the setbacks on the lot, but there was a house on there at one time.
So the reason to not just make it all one lot is to erasing both lot lines so that the McGuckins have one larger lot, and is just to be able to preserve development of that lot at some future date?
I don't think that any plans were arrived at with regard to this lot. I've heard nothing about development in the future. I think the idea with enlarging it was that it was the simplest. At the time, it seemed like the simplest approach to taking care of this strip and attaching it to one of the lots, and that's why the larger lot was used. This lot is the McGuckin residence.
Okay.
So to the extent a margin would be added to the boundaries, it made sense to add it to this one.
And the Schwartzmans, where do they take frontage on Gulf Creek Road?
Yeah, it's off of Gulf Creek, yes.
Okay. So this question is more for staff. Why was this not administrative? I thought when it's only 1 or 2 lot lines or one or two properties, it's administrative.
If the post-adjustment lots are large enough to be subdividable, or twice the minimum lot size, it can't be administrative. It's a quirk in the code. It should be administrative, other than the big lot is too big to be administrative. That's basically what it is.
Okay. All right, those are really the only questions. But we don't know about the size of that third lot.
No, we have what's on the plan, but
Okay.
I have not done the analysis whether
Okay, thanks.
development is.
Is there any public comment? Does staff have any additional comments, or, I mean, this looks really simple. Well, there's no harm in being simple once in a while. Does anyone want to propose a motion on this?
I propose we move this with a recommendation to approve.
There are, before you get too far, there are a few waivers
need
that
the
they need
waivers,
that are
right.
outlined in my letter. If you would just want to do a blanket
Right.
approval
So,
with the waivers outlined.
they are not contemplating any development.
No.
Okay. Because that's the thing about sometimes with these types of lot line changes, is that all of a sudden it's, people do it in two steps. They get their subdivisions or their lot line changes and then come back and it's just a building permit, and it kind of skirts some of the, some of the saldo stuff.
That's not the intention.
Okay.
And I believe that being that there's no water or sewer available, in order to subdivide this lot, it couldn't be done because there's 60,000 minimum square feet for that.
Okay.
So I don't think it's even possible, at least with regard to my client's lot.
Okay, great. So I move that we approve this lot line change and grant the waivers.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried and unanimous.
Thank you.
The next applicant, Bryn Mawr Trust, 322, 330 East Lancaster Avenue.
Good evening. Dave Fiorello from Omni on behalf of Bryn Mawr Trust. Bryn Mawr Trust owns the two parcels at 322 and 330 East Lancaster Avenue. They have a bank branch on the 330 parcel. There's an existing building on the 322 parcel that is used, I believe, for office use. Bryn Mawr Trust proposes to consolidate the two lots, demolish the residential-type building on the 322 property, and expand the parking for the bank building into that lot. So the project we have before you is a lot consolidation plan and a land development plan showing the new parking layout for the second parcel. We have comments from the engineers. I don't know if you want us to go through them, or is there any questions you have about the intent here? What's the best way that you would like us to discuss this?
I think you could respond to the comments from the engineer.
Okay. I have Janet Fleming's letter here dated September 25th. We are requesting a number of waivers here, and the one waiver is to substitute an aerial photograph as part of the location plan. Instead of a plan showing all the other features, we have that included as sheet 3 here in the plan set. And you can see where we have shown the existing building and the property next door and the surrounding areas. We do have a number of non-conforming issues with the existing lot, and most of the comments about under the zoning section, notes these existing nonconformities. The current building while it respects the front yard setback of Lancaster Avenue, it is on the corner of Lancaster and Pembroke. That existing building is not the required front yard distance. We're not making any changes to that building. The letter notes a bunch of several nonconformities relative to the height. The building is in excess of 35 feet in height. No proposed work to be done to the building. The note number 3 requires that a planting buffer be shown. I'm not sure if the engineer missed it, but we do have a buffer located on there. It may not have been adequately labeled as such, but we do have a 10-foot buffer along the rear property line.
You're talking about 322.
322 and 330 is existing, so
I mean, the buffer
the buffer.
is only 322 or both properties?
Both. There's an existing buffer along the back of 330. Currently, there is no buffer behind 322. We're proposing to add that buffer by moving the parking back so that we will have the 10-foot buffer along the back of 322. There was a question about parking calculations. The existing building meets the code for parking. I have those numbers. I can go over with them if you wish, but we will add them to the plan. Our plan is to add additional parking, which would put us over the required zoning requirements. We will add that to the plan. There's a note about the Wayne Business District lights that we're adding to the plan. And there's an existing nonconformity with the building parking in the front yard, both along Pembroke and Lancaster Avenue. We're proposing to maintain that. We're actually cutting back the nonconformity on the 322 site somewhat, but we're matching that to the existing parking on the 330 site.
I'm sorry, how are you cutting back on the nonconformity there?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Just how are you cutting back on that nonconformity?
Right now, the existing paving is closer to Lancaster Avenue.
Oh, I'm not looking at
You're looking at
The existing parking in front of the residential property is closer to the Lancaster Avenue than it's proposed in its final state.
So we're pulling that back away from Lancaster Avenue somewhat.
the paving.
The paving, yes.
Got it.
the total impervious change on 322.
There is actually a net reduction in the 322 site. I have that broken out, but there's we looked at the total impervious, whether it be merged or whether, right now, the existing 330 site was in for land development about 10 years ago, where we had met all the requirements at that time. So the existing 330 site is at the 50%. The 322 site currently is at 72%. By cutting it back, merging the lots and doing an average, we're about 55% of the total. There is a net reduction, but they're still over the maximum impervious if you look at the merged lots.
And the existing 322 property does or does not have any stormwater.
It does not.
And 330?
330 has a collection system. When the bank was in before the board in 2006, they did a building addition along the front here, and they did some adjustments of the parking lot. A stormwater system was added at that time in this corner to meet the storm code requirements at that time for the building addition. Other than that, there's no other stormwater management on this lot for that.
So in terms of even though you're merging the title or plan to merge the deeds into one deed, the stormwater that's proposed for 322 completely controls it at the current standard?
It controls the increase in impervious cover according to the township.
But
Let me go back.
It's-
The ordinance requires stormwater management for new and replacement impervious cover. So we calculated all the new and replacement impervious cover and provided the stormwater management to meet.
So are you treating the development of 322 as a 100% replacement or a 50% replacement of an existing impervious?
The, pretty much, I'm going to say about 50%, there's, the existing building comes down, so that's replacement. There's existing parking area that will remain, some of it's adjusted, so there is some trade-off, a little addition and subtractions, but we're providing the stormwater management for all the replacement impervious on that lot.
More questions?
No.
So I have a couple of questions. First
Yes.
of all, it's a curious thing to me that you have sufficient parking, but you want to consolidate the lots so that you can add more parking, in which case you'll have more parking than what you need for that particular building.
Yes.
Any particular reason you're doing that?
The bank owns the property on the other side of Pembroke Avenue, and it serves as overflow parking for that, both for the bank and for the building across the street.
What piece do they, oh, the other side of Pembroke, the one that they're doing some renovation work
Yes.
on?
Yes.
So is your intention to use parking from this lot to service parking across the street?
It would serve as overflow parking.
How does that fly with us? Do we let people do that? I'm looking to staff, sorry.
If
of
the
what? In
property,
terms of zoning?
Well, I mean, I saw that they're doing renovation. They're not expanding. Are they expanding the building on Pembroke and using parking on another property to meet the code for their parking?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Do we know from a building permit standpoint?
No, there's no.
Okay,
Yeah.
so are you doing that? Are you
What's the
making an
use?
addition on the building at the opposite corner of Pembroke and using the parking on this property to serve for the parking requirement for that property?
To my understanding, and I don't know that much about what is going on the Pembroke property.
Okay.
But my understanding, that building is being renovated.
Right?
Apparently, there's sufficient parking on the lot to meet the code
On the Pembroke
on the
lot?
Pembroke property.
Okay.
And that in case there's any need for overflow parking, we have it available both for this site and for the bank and for that property if needed.
What's the use in that property, the Pembroke property?
You need to come to the mic.
Ron Dan Cannon, Senior Vice President, Director of Facilities at Bryn Mawr. We're renovating 400 Lancaster Avenue for our commercial lending staff. There's significant staff going in there, plus with the branch at 330, we need additional between employee parking and customer parking, so we can avoid people parking on the streets and residential streets. So that's why we were trying to combine 322 and 330 for extra overflow parking to allow for that.
So I guess I'm still kind of puzzled because you own the lot where the house is. You could have just knocked that down and put parking in, but you're going this extra step of lot consolidation.
I'm afraid that by knocking that building down, parking is not a permitted principal use in the zoning district. So a parking lot per se is not allowed to stand on its own.
Got it. So you're combining it to be able to use the use there?
That is
Okay.
correct.
So that was one question. Then the other thing was, you know, with regard to the saldo notes here, where the parking lot is exceeding the 3%, is that down on the back where it abuts the residential properties?
Right now, the whole site, the site slopes from Lancaster Avenue towards the back at roughly a 5% grade. It's existing, the existing parking lot on the 330 site mimics what's happening on the 322 site, and they're both at a 5% grade. So if this were kept up at 3%, we'd have a transition between the two. So, I mean, we're trying just to maintain existing conditions.
Okay, got it. So, I mean, I think there are some concerns in the neighborhood about water flowing from this lot to the neighbors, so.
That we had met with the township engineer before we even came in and put plans together, and that was the first thing he mentioned.
Right,
One of the, with the addition of curbing along the back of the site, Our plans call for a number of inlets, collecting that, putting it into a stormwater system. So with the addition of the curbing along the back, that sort of blocks the pathway of water running off the parking lot as it currently does. It can run directly across because there's no curbing to stop it.
I mean, not for nothing, but so would a bigger buffer. So then the only other thing, this notion where you're going to, so you just said, you know, you're going to be having more business going on here. I mean, an expansion of commercial, you're planning for this parking lot to be used as overflow parking. We've been in communication with a property owner on the north side of Lancaster and have given them a pretty hard time about the width of the driveway. This is not in, you know, not in conformance with the saldo. And I would think that now's the time to widen the width of the driveway that enters onto Lancaster Avenue to improve the flow there.
That was one of the engineer's comments about current driveway width is 22.
Correct.
The standard is 25.
Right.
We were anticipating using the existing driveway. We're closing off the two driveways that serve the other site. But it sounds to me as that you concur with the engineer that it should be widened to 25
Well, it looks tight. I mean, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I know we've had a lot of conversations about the property on the north side of Lancaster. You know, I mean, other than being concerned about the back of the property and the trees and the water that's getting back there, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I appreciate it. I don't love the overflow, but, you know, it's your property. I understand that. It needs a little bit of work to make it, to Dave's point about wanting to keep status quo, I would want it to be better because things have been a little rough back there. But those were my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan, I want to go off of something you mentioned earlier. The property on the other side of Pembroke, the renovations that you're doing right now, are they requiring or will they require in the near future or anytime, any intentions to require additional parking? I mean, obviously, you may say as a business we need more parking, but is the township going to be requiring you such that you're going to have to depend on these lots and consolidate? Because that was one of the problems we had across the street is they wanted to depend on other properties to be able to meet their needs, and it doesn't go over very well. So I want to understand what you're doing at 400.
Before he speaks, I can
Yes,
tell
you
you
can
that,
answer. Okay.
that if additional parking would have been required at the time of the building permit submitted, it would have been required and it would have happened. So I'm confident in the building department that they've looked at that.
How many?
Can you explain do you have a landscape plan?
We do have a plan showing.
Excuse me if I can interject while you brought that up. You know, I've spoken to some of the residents on the south side of the property, and I visited that south side. There is an existing wall that actually shows outside the property line, and I did approach the applicant this afternoon. We would request that they do some additional planting to help buffer for the residents on the south side of the wall, as well as along that entire stretch of the existing bank lot down to Pembroke, all the way over to the CVS parking lot. So if you were on the site, there's some trees that should be removed. There's some buffer. There should be some buffer planting on the actual site, and the staff, myself, is requesting that they address the south side of that wall also.
I'm so sorry. Before I forget, were the Barnabeos properly notified? Because you've got the wrong property owners to the east of the Higgins. It's not the Grillos. It's a different family. Were they notified of this plan?
I have
Barnabeos?
I believe they were. We had gotten a list of addresses and owners from the township.
I'm concerned because it's the former owners on the plan.
Yes, understood. And I think it's my fault for not updating the plan, but I believe the owners were notified.
So do you want to explain your landscape plan? It doesn't look like you're actually adding any landscaping.
Well, we do. We have a number of trees. I mean, we show an addition of 11 trees. We have some buffer planting along the back, and we have some trees planted within the parking lot to address the tree requirements.
I guess my biggest concern, because I drive through that CVS parking lot, which is really unsightly. I'm not sure how they managed to do that, but on your property line with that CVS parking lot, Aren't you contemplating some landscaping along there?
We,
I mean, it's
technically,
really
not-
unsightly now, and you're going to open it up even more by taking the house down. So it's going to be really a big, wide-open space.
it's also it's not a residentially zoned property that the code requires landscaping along there.
Oh, okay. So we can make it ugly then? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
We'll make every effort to clean up the property and put all the necessary landscaping in. You got our word, so. We'll clean up that lot, the back lot, and improve anything on there that needs to be improved.
Sorry, could you
Actually,
speak
it's more
into the
for
mic?
your benefit. I don't think you really want to associate with that parking lot. It's not particularly nice. I think you'd like to separate yourself from it.
He might not show as much as we were going to go to.
Yeah.
We were going to go to the.
Could you speak into the mic, please? I'm sorry.
But
Cannot
it
hear
would-
you.
We plan on cleaning up everything around the property the way it should be, so it'll look nice when it's all done.
So you're going to add some landscaping between you and the CVS lot? That's just so you don't have to look at it either, so.
Correct.
I had one question about the lighting.
Yes, sir.
Will the lighting be identical, or are you proposing it to be identical to what's at Bryn Mawr?
The existing
bank lot, the 330?
Yes, we are. The existing shoebox fixtures on the bank side will be mimicked for the other piece.
Is that the current code, or is that another nonconformity you would like to
I
perpetuate?
believe it's a conforming item.
Well, considering how you abut the residential properties, I'm wondering if this is the moment to do a little less intense, a little WBOD-type lighting, maybe?
Well, the lighting fixtures that we have shown, I've shown the lighting pattern on here to show you the foot candle layout where we illuminated the parking lot,
Which
and
page?
our spillover stops at the property line. That's on sheet 7?
Oh, that's what those are.
Yes. That's the
You're
isolate
saying,
station.
I think what's confusing me, Dave, is it says proposed Wayne Business District streetlights, except that this isn't in the WBOD. So do you mean the WBOD lights?
The existing WBOD lights are in front of the bank. We were carrying them along the frontage of 322, but the interior lights for the parking lot are the regular shoebox
Yeah.
lights that are on similar to what's on the bank now.
Got it. Steve, they have WBOD lights down there?
They do, and you are correct. They are outside the WBOD.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so I was just trying to clarify, because I know that that's not WBOD, but you happen to have WBOD.
Along the street, along
Got
the
it.
street
But
frontage.
the parking lot lights, you're not proposing making a change to those and bringing in something that has a lower foot candle?
I believe the foot candle requirement is in the ordinance that you have to provide a certain amount of illumination to the parking lot. So we're providing that minimum
I meant to
illumination.
shield it, direct it away from the residential houses to the south.
Our-
I meant
our-
more directionally, not so much
I believe the
style.
boxes can be shielded if that's a requirement to shield the neighbors. Right now, with our light spillage, we're not going off the property line. I believe our fixtures are only 15 feet high, so there's not a lot of spillage.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I have one concern about the entrance to the off Lancaster Avenue. Right now, it's one-way going in off Lancaster. So both lanes, traffic only goes into the bank from Lancaster. So your plan has traffic going in and out. I think there's going to be a flow issue because people, number one, the customers are not used to that. They're used to going in off Lancaster, and, that's the only move they can make. And the only entrance right now is on the Pembroke side. You're going to add parking. I think you're going to have a flow issue here. Sort of the same concern we had with the property across the street. know, people coming, if you have people coming in and out of that small space, it seemed to me, when I looked at the site, that the driveways you're taking out, you could add a driveway in or out on the 322 property. It seems like it doesn't make sense to me to bottleneck this thing the way you're doing it.
Well, our thought was to eliminate the driveway conflicts along Lancaster Avenue by eliminating the driveway into that site. I mean, we can leave this as a one-way in and have the exit Pembroke as a one-way out. I think the majority of the traffic will travel through the site, and we'll just sign it accordingly.
I just think that having a two-way issue in that small space is going to lead to a
Well,
lot of...
one of the comments raised earlier was to widen that driveway, so we could widen it to two-way. Or we could leave it at the 22-foot and just have the one-way traffic in.
What is your goal by eliminating the other driveways? Why would you not want an entrance, say, on the left and an exit on the right where you have the two-way?
I believe we felt that they were just too close together, and I think PennDOT doesn't allow, Amy?
I think if that was an entrance on the left
Yeah.
and an exit on the right, a one-way each way, that would be...
You could have separation, and I have to admit, the plans don't show that as being just an entrance on Lancaster, so I didn't pick up that in the plan, but now that I'm looking at Google Map, I can see it. So the plan needs to be amended to show the correct existing conditions for that.
And we'll fix that.
But yes, PennDOT will allow separate accesses, one entrance, one exit on Lancaster Avenue, if that's something that's desired.
Or it may address your concern is to make that opening
Or open the driveway.
meet the current standard for width, which might alleviate some of your concerns, as
Well,
opposed
one
to
of the
creating
two
another
things
one.
is going to do it, either a one-way in to the west where Regina's mentioning, and then one way out onto Lancaster, and then if you go through the drive-through, you exit onto Pembroke. That's always been the one-way thing. Or widening the 22 feet, because to Matt's point, it's way too tight to be serving that large of a parking lot. But actually, I'm going to need you to go back at some point and walk us through the parking calculations on page 5, because it's showing that you're not going to have any more parking spaces than you have now.
Except, Sue, that they're eliminating a building,
We're eliminating the buildings. Actually, there
which
is
needs parking
a
right now.
net increase in parking.
No, I understand that, but the chart doesn't say that. That's the problem.
On sheet,
On sheet 5, it says that the existing is 52 spaces, and that when this is all done, the combined spaces will be 52. On page 5, unless I'm misunderstanding something. And you didn't even count the number of spaces existing at 322. It's a question mark.
yes. And I apologize for that. There's actually a net, when you combine, when you look at the two, instead of the 52 spaces that we have now existing, we have, I know I put this on here somewhere, and I apologize.
Well, I mean, I can count the spaces. You should answer somebody else's questions.
There's, what did we say, 80?
I think there's 18.
That comment is item 4 on page 2 of my
I think
letter.
there's 18 existing parking spaces on 322 and approximately 50,
There's 52 on it.
52 on 330.
Look at page 2, Sue, bottom left of page 2.
Yes, I knew I fixed it. I failed to carry it over to the sheet 5.
Thank you. So, yeah, you need to correct page 5 then, because the
Certainly will
information's...
do that.
Okay, great.
And I apologize for the confusion.
So we go from 70 to 77 to 86.
So you're going to lose a handy... No, that's...
No, wait, I just read that. It says you're going from 77 on the 2 lots to 86 on the
Yes,
2
there's a
lots.
very minimal
Increase in parking,
Where are you seeing 86?
right at the bottom here. I just added it up.
Oh, 82 plus 4, right, I was looking at regular.
So between the, excuse me, between the your 322 and the CVS lot, is there a grade change? I'm not,
Not much of a change. If it's anything, it's inches.
it's
There-
almost level?
yeah, it's-
So
it's-
so in your plan, what is the detail? Would be the section through that space?
I'm sorry, I'm not following your line of questioning.
Between the CVS lot and 322,
Yes.
you said there's no grade change, so what does that?
Their parking lot ends, you
Yeah.
have the property line, we have a strip of grass, and then curbing line, and then the curb line along there, there is a grade change as a result of the top and bottom of curb, if that's what you're asking.
So is there a curb along the property line? No,
Not now. There will be.
there will be, okay.
Yes, we're proposing curbing along there.
Okay, I just, it's not clear on the
I'm
drawing.
sorry.
Mr. Fiorello, if I could ask, the grade changes in the existing parking lot where the house is being demolished, how would they be accomplished?
Mr. Norsini, the land is relatively level on either side of the building, so the intent is to demolish the building and backfill that area and bring it up to grade.
Well, no, I'm looking at your proposed contours and your existing contours. So there's a 3.7 in the upper right corner, a 3.68. So it would all, I guess what my question is, it's all going to be done with paving, either the addition or removal of paving sections?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The reason I'm pushing the landscaping is because we've seen in previous applications, the loss of this rhythm of what were the residential properties. I think it's really important to kind of maintain that, and if we could do that with landscaping, that's great. But to make those spaces wide open, I think really is disturbing to the whole area. I mean, if you look across the street from you here.
Sure.
In that giant, essentially all you see is that giant parking lot.
Well, we do have a grass strip between
Yeah.
the property line and that, and certainly that can
Okay,
be landscaped.
yeah. No, thank you.
I want to get back to getting in and out of this place. I'm really concerned how you would, if you would exit on the Lancaster Avenue, trying to head west. That seems like it could potentially really be problematic, especially if you got a car heading east trying to get in. I don't care if it's 22 feet or 25 feet. I don't know if there's not how you would redesign this so that it's an in and out, whether it be only in off of Lancaster Avenue and out of Pembroke, some kind of flow. I just think that if two cars trying to get in and out, especially if one's a truck coming in and it's a car going out, you're not going to see that car hit you.
Well, we've had a discussion here, and I think we can maintain the one-way entrance in off of Lancaster and maintain the exit onto Pembroke, if that satisfies your comment.
I think that's kind of what you have to do. Just from I can see it being a real potential, especially there's no light at Pembroke, and you got traffic coming either way. You got everything that's happening across on the north side of Lancaster Avenue. Now you have people trying to come in and out in the middle of a block with a corner coming up pretty quick. I think that's trouble. I think you would have to that is one way, in my estimation.
But you can't go left from Pembroke out onto Lancaster Avenue.
That is correct.
So whatever cars come out of there and want to go the other way, you're forcing them back through the residential area. I know, but why increase that?
But it's not.
Susan, 4.
But I can't see the driveway in front of the post office on sheet 4. Where's the existing entrance?
We have an entrance right at each
Oh,
corner
it's
of the
the
property.
gray stuff,
It's
the
gray-
impervious you're gonna
It's
remove.
the gray area coming out. So there's 2 pieces that come into that lot.
How are these two properties been getting serviced by trash trucks and delivery trucks? How have they been getting in?
Ron, can you answer that?
Mainly, they come into our 330 lot, come straight down, do whatever they need to do, and then exit out on Pembroke.
Thank you.
We have other board comment, because I'd like to do some public comment, and then that may inform us on.
One of the things that I'd like to bring up that the engineer had mentioned was the fact that we would need, and it was pointed out to me, that the curb island or the islands that we have at the end of the row of parking in the center require a 5-foot radius, basically a 10-foot wide island there. We're proposing a 5-foot island in that area. We're trying, that gets us another parking spot on either side. So a waiver would be required from that section. Susan, here?
Yeah.
And here.
We noticed, just noticing, where's your cartway, never mind the entrance width, where's your driveway widths?
I have them on the plan. They probably got lost in some of the information on here, but I've got the parking,
Aisle widths are 22. He's got it marked coming down.
20 feet for the parking, 22 feet for the aisle, 20 feet for the parking.
But where? On which sheet? Because it's not on sheet 6.
It is on sheet 5.
Oh.
Why are you requesting the waiver to make your islands smaller? I mean, I understand you want more parking, but is there a way that you can get those islands to meet code without?
We could meet that code. We have an option. We could meet the width at either end if we were allowed to have 12 spaces in a row instead of, right now we have this center island here to break up that row of parking. If we were to widen this, we would have 12 spaces. If we could eliminate the center island, we would have 12 parking spaces in a row.
Is there a hardship? Is that why you're requesting this?
The bank is trying to get as much parking on the site as they can.
No hardship.
Yeah, I guess the way I'm looking at it right now is I'm inclined to recommend against any waivers that encourage a massive amount of parking where there's currently not an open parking lot. The reason we are not allowed to make that just a parking lot is we don't want just a parking lot there, but that's what we're kind of getting with this plan. So if there's any way you can rethink the situation and not provide us with a parking lot in addition to your building that already has a parking lot, we might be more inclined to work on waivers and things, because these waivers are just allowing you to put in a parking lot next to a building with a parking lot.
How big is I've been puzzling over this for like half an hour now. The building is how many square feet? You guys are putting in the bank building. Do you know how many square feet it is total? I know it's like 6,000 square feet of impervious, so how many, I don't know how many floors it is.
I took the information from our plans from 2006. At that time, we had shown 13,148 square feet for that building.
So 13,000 square feet needs 82 parking spots?
It only needs 52.
That's my point. You're building 82 parking spaces when you need 52. That is so unusual in this township. Usually people are trying to figure out how to be able to, so I think that there's going to be a whole lot more going on here than maybe a little bit of overflow from across the street. Something's kind of strange about this, that you guys are building 30 more parking spots than you need for a 13,000 square foot building. Do you have any?
It's only a net of 10 or 12.
I know that, but you're going to a lot of trouble to do this, to add 10 parking spaces when you already have enough parking spaces. And, to your point, the reason they're doing it is they can't just knock down the house and have more parking. So you're having to go through this time and expense to combine the two lots to be able to have 10 more parking spaces. It's just very puzzling. That's all.
They're working on 6.3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. Most places are running 3 or 4. So you're
Exactly.
you know, you're really up above the standard, way above the standard. You're 6.3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. That's a lot of parking spaces. So what you're really trying to do is, you're really not just parking for this building, you're parking for the building across the street too.
Or north on Lancaster.
Right.
Or the Pembroke stuff.
Now, we did similar to this, I don't know if you remember when, at the corner by when they built the parking lot, lower the condos across the street on the north side, they knocked down, but they didn't put this many, weren't as extensive as this, did they? I don't remember it being that traumatic. It was like maybe 15 cars or something, if I remember correctly.
And it turns out that they,
Yep, plus which the
and
other
they still
thing.
want more parking. If we remember the development last month, part of the promise was to give them weekend parking.
Right.
If I may just ask the applicant, I guess what's perplexing to me and maybe some of the planning commission, so the renovation you're doing in the building across Pembroke Avenue for your lending group meets all the requirements for parking based on that use, yet you're looking for additional parking, and to the point where you're asking for waivers on island width and things like that to get every last spot out. So I guess that use across in Pembroke's got me a little perplexed, and the fact that knowing that this is overflow, why there's the waivers to try to squeeze every last spot out without knowing exactly what you need, so to speak. I'm not speaking for them, but that's kind of what I'm hearing, and that's what my question is.
Well, and here's the thing. I appreciate that you guys feel like you're only adding 10 spots. I do appreciate that, except that you're going to take out a house that is actually buffer for the neighborhood from Lancaster Avenue. And I mean, I get
It's
it.
an
It's
old
kind of a
house.
quirky
One of the
old,
originals.
it's a little out of place. I don't, I liked it when it was the post office, but it's different kind of buffer for sound and light, and it's going away. To have 10 more parking spots here. Yeah, whatever.
You got to remember that our 400 Lancaster Avenue that we're renovating is 18,000 square foot building with all of our commercial lending department, which is going to have a lot of or significant customer access to that building. So in order to park all of our employees and also allow for that overflow for customer parking, that is why we're going through this.
So this sounds more like a building permit issue with however this thing, your 400 Pembroke thing, went through the building permit issue and the parking that was maybe going to be needed over there.
That was my question.
And to the waiver that you wanted of the 500 square, the 500 foot and just supplying the paper, I think that what's going on at 400 Pembroke, I mean, you said 18,000 square feet? How many spots do you have over there?
49.
So you don't have enough parking over at the larger building.
But there's nothing limiting someone's parking.
What do you mean there's not something limiting?
I mean, if they want to put parking there, they can put parking there,
Parking where?
on this site. I mean, what?
Well, they want to take down a house.
We don't need to maximize
No,
it.
Steve, they want to take down a house, do a lot consolidation.
Yes. Is any of that against the code?
They need some
Well, we
waivers
don't
to
need
do
to
it.
grant the waivers.
Well, I don't
to
think you should
put
get the
extra
waivers either. I think
parking
it's just a
spots.
poor plan, but that's another issue. I just think it's poorly designed, it's not very attractive, and that should be corrected. But this other argument is, does not seem to be
I'm not really
within-
concerned about what's going on across the street. I'm only concerned with what you have in front of us.
Yes.
And I wish there was a way to make more sense for everybody involved, for you to get the parking that you need, for the neighbors to get the buffer that they need, for the viewscape on Lancaster Avenue not to suffer so much. It's actually, in front of me, it's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity to make something really nice, and I know you want a quality investment, and you're going to be putting a lot into this investment. So the traffic flow isn't quite there, and certainly the landscaping, even if you lost 2 parking spots and people had to park on Pembroke Avenue, but then you had a beautiful space, wouldn't that be worth it, thinking about that, to make the flow work and everything else? Do you really need to get this number of parking spaces? Is this the number you need, or is it you're just trying to maximize the amount on the site? And is it possible to maybe dial it back just slightly and come back with a much more workable plan?
Thought filled.
But that would be a better investment for you as well.
And we haven't heard from the neighbors yet, but have you had any meetings with the neighbors?
No, we have not.
We'll take a pause here in terms of how we're proceeding and have the public come up and speak, if they're going to speak. And again, I apologize for my frog voice.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Higgins. I live behind the proposed building.
And Dave Higgins, we're at 323 Midland Avenue, so we're the sort of center property behind the bank.
And we just wanted to give a brief, history of our relationship with Bryn Mawr Trust and having it behind us. We've been there for 20 years, and when we moved in, there was a screen of evergreens, and slowly, because of a really bad stormwater runoff that used to put rivers in our yard, a lot of trees have died, all the screening, so now we look at the bank in the winter, as well as we've lost 3 maple trees in our yard and our budding neighbor, the Barnabeos. So we've lost a lot of trees.
Due to excessive runoff.
So,
from the
yes.
bank.
Dan Malloy helped us find a stormwater drain, and they were able to pump it out like 10 years ago. And that helped us with a little bit of the rivers, but we still, have toxic runoff coming into our yards. So we're very concerned about this because we're hoping that this is an opportunity, as you mentioned, to improve the screening for us and to be good neighbors to us. All 3 of us have the same issue of noise, lights at night, and we would really like to see a big improvement with that. So we're hoping that there's a bigger screen, a bigger buffer between our lot. Like, we can't even step over our little wall. It's usually water. It's usually standing water. So it would just be really nice if, as you say, that it could make it something nicer for us as well, and for the Barnabeos and for the Duners, so that we're not staring at these huge imposing lights when we're in our backyard all winter long. Right now, we just have a few deciduous trees, nothing really left. So we're very worried about that. We're worried about the lights. And we're just hoping, after many contacts with the bank, and they've never really replaced them. We've asked them to, and they're like, so it's not in our budget. Nothing has changed. It's just gotten worse and worse as we've lived there. So we're hoping for a change and hoping this is a great
Excuse me for a second. You said you were asking them to replace the plantings? Okay.
So they also have, they shove with their plows in the winter. They've knocked over. We've tried to plant little trees. They've been shoved out of the way. Sometimes when we've had big snows, all the way up against our wall, which has actually caused flooding because it covers the stormwater drain that came out. So we asked them to replace the trees that died because of the toxic runoff, and that they never did. So what used to be a nice screen for us, now we just look at a bank and the Land Rover dealership.
We also own about 3 feet behind the wall that divides our properties, which is constantly getting plowed all the way up to the wall when it's a huge snowstorm. So they just keep pushing. We've planted several pine trees, small ones, but they've all been killed due to plowing and whatnot. We put other flowers and stuff on the back side of our wall just to try and make, as well as some trees, taller trees that are now finally starting to come around.
And what is the
At
height
our
of,
expense.
And what is the height of your wall?
I believe it's 8 feet, Tom, is that? Yeah,
8?
yes. That's what's.
over an 8-foot wall.
No,
Pardon?
not over, but up to it. So
Yeah.
all that, there is a lot of runoff that starts at CVS, goes from the back of their lot. I think it's more of a grade than, I don't know, I might say, because it just all seems to run right to where we live. And it's always been that way.
The curbing is going to help that, as Mr. Fiorello pointed out, right? So they're not going to be necessarily be able to push up. There is an inlet down there. Mr. Kunda, if I could make a suggestion, perhaps we've all heard the flavor and the comments of this planning commission. Perhaps we meet staff meet with the applicant and go through these items and see if we can have them work out something that's more amenable to the Planning Commission?
I also think that the neighbors up to this point haven't had their chance to have a proper meeting, and not all the neighbors may have known about tonight.
We can facilitate that. And you know, Bryn Mawr Trust, they're a great corporate entity. We enjoy having them in the township, and we also enjoy having all our residents here and need to protect them. They could use this building or one of these rooms if they want to meet. We wouldn't necessarily partake in that meeting, but that could be something where they meet here. We can facilitate that. And then I think if we met with Bryn Mawr Trust offline of this meeting, we can go through a lot of these things and perhaps work out some things to come back with that's somewhat more acceptable to the commission.
And particularly now where they're touching the property in a significant and major way, especially the 322, if there is a water problem, maybe it has to be more than the code to make it all work for everybody involved. All the stakeholders need some protection here.
If you look at that wall, that return, if you walk the property, so that gets really deep right there. So I don't know what that was originally designed for, but that's maybe something, and I think that's what you were talking about when you climb over the wall. I think there's a lot of things we could work with the applicant on. After hearing your comments, Roger Phillips' detailed letter, Amy Kaminsky's detailed letter.
I think
Not superseding any other public comment, but just.
I would move after we hear any additional public comment that we table so that they can meet with staff and with the neighbors and iron out some of the concerns that we have and the neighbors and the staff have.
Well, on the chance that there's something else, before we act on that motion, I'd like to give the neighbors their opportunity. And then we'll do your motion, Charlie, just hang on to it.
I second to table it.
Okay.
The other thing I'd like to just point out is
Well, I
that
just don't want to vote on it yet, if we can help that.
we talked earlier, we heard earlier about a request for a waiver on the slope of this parking lot, which I don't think would be appropriate here. And that puts a big problem here, because if they want to keep the existing slope on the other side and maintain that, we would need a significant change in what's going on at the rear of the property, because with that slope, we're just exacerbating the current condition,
It's the difference between 5% and 3%.
which is a lot.
It's some, but
It's a lot in stormwater volume and velocity.
see, I look at that as a pre-existing condition.
Wow, once you remove that house, I think all bets are off, and you've consolidated lots here.
Yeah, but I think that.
John
Topo, I
Rice,
was
would
there, I
that,
went
would that
out
be a
today.
pre-existing condition that they would be permitted to maintain? Yeah, on the parking lot,
Yes.
even when they remove the house? Because that's all new pavement in that area.
See, if you, the
the
elevation
house-
would have to occur at the rear of the property. So instead of the lights being below an 8-foot wall, maybe they're 3 feet up or 2 feet up now. In other words, if you
I'm
raise,
referring to the slope of the pavement creating
the
water
slope
issues.
is downhill towards the residential property.
Right, so water issues for the residents.
but
The
it-
steeper the slope, the faster the water flows
Not
off.
necessarily. I mean, there is a certain amount of runoff, but we are
If they
adding,
do a proper amount of retention.
we are adding 4 additional stormwater inlets and a system in there, plus the curbing along the back that would direct it exactly to the inlets, but at the same time act as somewhat of a dam, if that's the proper word, to block the water flow onto the neighboring properties.
The only problem with that is, as the Higgins pointed out, it's not a problem in July. It's a problem in January when there's 8 inches or a foot of snow that's been piled up over the back part of the lot. And you're not going to get any runoff. It's just going to sit there and.
And perhaps one thing, I mean, we do have a 10-foot buffer there. Maybe it is possible to create a berm or somewhat within that buffer to raise the grade and then plant the trees in there. That acts as an additional blockage if that's something that we could think about.
I just know from past experience, you got to kind of watch. The guys who plow will just plow it to the back of the property, and if there's water inlets there, eventually the inlets will get covered, and then they'll freeze, and you will not get any runoff, and it'll just sit there and start running, and it'll become just a big sheet of ice. So that's, you know, you got to watch your curb doesn't get so that what potentially is good in July is a hazard in January.
Yeah, exactly. But let's see if there's.
Do we have additional public comment?
Hello, my name is Tom Dooner, the neighbor of the Higgins to the west, 321 Midland Avenue. I think you very well pointed out that the house does offer the neighbors a buffer, and it's really a shame to see that go, because I don't know if it was mentioned, but it's one of the original 1890s houses that was, you know, the rest of the neighborhood is part of the historic district. I don't know why that was cut out of the historic district, but just to echo what Jennifer and Dave said, we are concerned about the lighting and especially the runoff. So if we could have a bigger buffer and some mature plantings there, I think it would be very helpful.
I think a meeting with the applicant will be very productive,
Yes.
or
Okay.
can be.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Cheryl Tamola, Midland Avenue. Your discussion of the inflow and outflow of this. Okay. Your discussion of the inflow and outflow there is interesting to me, in that they have installed these Wayne Business District lighting there. And I think the idea back a gazillion years ago when we were doing the comprehensive plan was to kind of make this also part of the business district eventually. And so I applaud them for doing that and kind of making that effort. But your interest in, and so to me, the idea of getting rid of the in-out at where they're tearing down the house, which is sad to me, but be that as it may, is to make fewer curb cuts. I do walk there all the time, and it is a perilous place to walk on. First of all, there's like, this curb's about this big by now because over the years they've redone the road and it gets shorter and shorter. It's all rubble. The sidewalk in front of there is awful also. And the idea that it is difficult for people to go in or out of there doesn't seem to bother the car wash or the Verizon store or the CVS. People make lefts and rights into and out of there all day long. And despite the fact that they're going to have this new robust loan center, I doubt if they'll have more ins and outs than the CVS. So I think that but this will also, I mean, that centerpiece will have an in and out.
I guess what our concern was that that's a two-way as proposed, but it's not wide enough for a two-way.
Right, but I think widening it would be a very good idea. I'm not saying that.
You would
To
propose
widening
widening
it.
one entrance and eliminating the other two curb
Yes.
cuts. That's
So
where I
that
thought you were
also
going.
you can really landscape there, because what these neighbors need is a softening of their interface with Lancaster Avenue. Even though it is a block away, it's still a serious interface with Lancaster Avenue. So I would like to steer your attention in that way. I think that they really need to seriously landscape this. There used to be another lovely house there that was torn down, and the CVS paved it over, and there's absolutely no stormwater management on it, and there's no curbing, and there's no lines, and for some reason or other, no one ever stopped them from doing it.
That's the old vet office, Dr.
No, the vet
Hugo's.
office was behind my house. This was just another pretty old house that was used for offices. Actually, it was the prettiest one. At any rate, so I remember where the Bryn Mawr Trust was actually a beautiful house. So I just think that the idea of kind of calming things along that walkway, I mean, there are a lot of people that do walk along there. It would just be, and especially if these people from the loan department are going to be walking back and forth somewhere, let's make it something that is desirable to walk on. And I'm worried about dumping traffic back into Pembroke, because what happens is that they go around and they go down Midland Avenue, down their block. And that's, we shouldn't have to do that. So these are just my traffic thought ideas. Thank you.
Any further public comment? No. Now we can have Charlie's. Yes, please.
That was a long time ago.
Wait, one second before that. I thought that was a good point about just widening that proposed rather than, and I think that's an excellent point. But when we're looking at maybe giving up waivers for breaks in the parking spots, if you look at the lower part of the plan and we have those 2 bump outs, those 2 bump outs wouldn't be as needed if that buffer got bigger on the back end. You know, the things that we have in the code, the intention, if there's another way to find another approach to getting the intention of those things and then asking for a waiver from them, not to put an extra parking space, but to put a bigger buffer in the rear or something along those lines, or even a bigger buffer along the 2 properties, the CVS property, rather than having that one bump out in the middle, which really gets us nowhere. Having a bigger buffer on that side and not having those island bump outs. Is there a way to rework the plan, get similar parking out of it with just larger buffers and not those planted islands?
Would the Planning Commission be adverse to perhaps narrowing this center planted planted island there to create a wider buffer along the western side?
I think this is why we want to table the thing and you talk it over with everybody.
Well, we would like that.
For us to try and hash it out.
But I think giving
we
them
can
a
do
little
that.
feedback as to the types of things we're looking for in improvement is a good idea.
I think they
And that's
know
what
that.
I'm asking for.
Yeah, I think they know that. I think that, you know, I think what we want to do is make it more aesthetically pleasing to the eye because you're taking down a buffer, so you got to put a buffer back between Lancaster Avenue and the residents behind, as well as to you know, maybe the biggest problem is just too many parking spaces. So you may lose a couple parking spaces in order to achieve some of the things you need as well as some of the things we need. And that's why you're going to meet with staff and the neighbors to solve that problem instead of trying to solve it here and then come back with a better plan. I think is a lot easier. And I'll make my motion again, which is the second the request and they can meet with staff and with some of the neighbors. I said table.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're tabling this for now. We're not denying it, and we're not approving it.
Do we need an extension, or we're not at that point?
Take care of that if we need it.
Thank you.
So was that a unanimous tabling? Did you guys vote? Oh, all right.
Yep. So we've had a lot of public comment. I doubt that there's a public comment about other topics, but I'll ask. And the answer is no. Okay. Do we have any old business? Any new business?
Question about new business. Do we know any results of the stormwater changes and when they're coming into effect, or if there's going to be any sort of review of plan for the township?
There was the Board of Commissioners Public Works Subcommittee, and there was some items noted to be changed or to be put in as a draft, but that has not come back around yet. Again, I don't know when that'll be ready to come before this commission or Stormwater Management Advisory Committee.
Is it possible to look at that in the form that it is at any point?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, it was a televised meeting, and the comments were all laid out. So I can share something with the Planning Commission on that.
Are there minutes from that meeting, public minutes available?
There were no meeting minutes, but it was televised.
Okay.
You can go online and look it up.
Yeah.
And watch it.
Maybe adjourn?
Okay, let's adjourn.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.